All right, peace, peace, everybody. This your boy, Minister Jew. I'm back with another video for you guys. This one, we're going to be talking about this latest case of forgiveness that was displayed by the Jean family in relationship to Amber Guyger, this female cop who killed Botham Jean roughly about a year or so ago, and has everybody in an uproar over how it ended, specifically with, the brother embracing her with a long hug, the judge also passing her a Bible, the father making references to potentially being her friend at some point. So we have a series of events that transpired that comes off to be a tad bit strange. But what I want to do today is to take you guys down a different pathway of understanding in relationship to the nuts and bolts of how we're made neurologically, so that we can get a better understanding of how to circumvent these type of public displays, right? People from the outside looking in say, wow, what's really going on with these people? What's the issue? But before we get into that, because we're really going to dive deep into it today, I want to talk to you guys about my 28 days of gratitude and visualization, opening the pathways to success, which starts on Sunday, October the 6th, and it ends on November the 3rd, 2019. I did a prior video in relationship to why gratitude is important. It's right here on my YouTube channel. I think it's the last video that I made. So if you want to get introduced into why gratitude is important, then I think you should go back, watch that video, and the link will be in the description box, along with some other links. I have memberships for people who may be interested in really learning this quantum information and how to really apply it. I have a membership called the Quantum Imaging Membership, as well as some Quantum Scriptures memberships as well, where we take people to a different level of understanding what's really inside of these holy texts, outside of the traditional means of what the pastors and the preachers and the ministers are teaching it from. Relatively speaking, they're just not equipped because they truly haven't been sent to express what's in the text. And because they haven't had the subjective experiences, and which leads to objective principles and results from people who engage with the individual, they really don't know how to interpret the books. And so people are just lost, generally speaking, inside of the mosque, the synagogue, the churches, etc. But anyways, the link for the 28 days of gratitude and visualization, opening the pathways, will be in the description box. If you are interested in participating in that, I suggest you sign up ASAP. Now, moving on, because I do want to talk about, this is where people immediately go in relationship to when we see these situations happen with people of color. The first phrase that gets thrown out there is what? Oh, that's the Stockholm Syndrome. So let's read it. Stockholm Syndrome is a condition which causes hostages to develop a psychological alliance with their captors during captivity. These alliances result from a bond formed between captor and captors during intimate time together, but they are generally considered irrational in light of the danger or risk endured by the victims. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. So what happens is people use this term as a reference to show or the display that's happening amongst people of color and white people. So it has its place, right? Because we can see it developing right in front of our faces. And this is how we address it. We say, oh, man, we got the Stockholm Syndrome and it's bad. And then we go to name calling. And, you know, I've seen it with the Jean family, 10 minutes before the verdict. Everybody was riding for the Jean family. Then the moment they started to show this forgiveness to Amber Guyger, then people all over the internet start calling these people names. It just went from love to hate in a matter of 10 minutes, based upon the way that the family responded to the killer of their relative, right? And so I just said, wow, this is interesting dichotomy here of what's happening. And so I really wanted to break this thing down, but I wanted to first touch on this because, of course, this is where everybody goes to. This is the typical response that you get when these type of events happening. But we have to go deeper. And how can we circumvent this if we know that there's because they say it's considered irrational in the light of the danger and the risk by the victim, which it is. You say, well, wow, man, you're in a state of terror. It's a moment where you can die or you actually get killed, and now all of a sudden you're sympathizing with the individual who did it. So it makes a bunch of sense, right? But the thing is, how do we move forward past the name calling and identifying what the problem is? And now we have to move toward a solution to the problem. And the only way we're going to do that is understanding how we're made neurologically, so that we can start to put barriers and borders up to how to protect ourselves until we get psychologically whole. All right? So let's look at it. I want to read this. This is the neurobiology of forgiveness, right? I shared this with some of my members, and I want to read some of these things to you because the first thing I do, I go right to the brain. I don't care what the commentary is. I'm going to the structure inside of our head that funnels consciousness through it to give us this experience that we call life, because this is where the answers are going to lie. And I want to just read some of these clips to you, right? The inferior frontal gyrus, known to play a strong role in language and impulse control, was smaller in people who considered themselves to be more forgiving. This suggests that forgiving is not related to verbal skills, nor is it a completely rational, listen to this, or controlled behavior that can be moderated by thoughts and feelings that are not well articulated. Now, this is interesting. Why, Jew? They're telling you that in some strange way, the act of forgiving doesn't necessarily deal with rationale or logic. This is important, right? The language centers, look, it says strong role in language. Now, the language centers are relatively in the left hemisphere of the brain. This is where all of the reasoning, the logic, right? This is where we're processing this reality from a place of objectivity. But they're telling us that there's something about forgiveness that doesn't really deal with that portion of the brain or that region of the brain. Okay? Now, also here, let's look at this. While the brain structure in relation to forgiveness is interesting, the brain's metabolic function in relation to forgiveness adds a whole new dimension to understanding forgiveness. When volunteer participants in one study were asked to imagine scenarios and report their TFF, a low level of dorsomedial prefrontal cortex activity was associated with lower TFF scores. The dorsomedial prefrontal cortex is believed to play a role in the ability to imagine the feelings of others. This low imaginative ability was correlated with lower forgiveness. Now, y'all always hear me talking about imagination, right? And our ability to be creative, to come up with different solutions to problems. This is important Now, black people, generally speaking, are some of the most imaginative people on the entire planet. How do we know this? We see it all the time. Oh, the black person invented this. They were the first one that made this. We come up with all these different things in culture, right? So we have a heightened sense of imagining, right? So what do you think happens to people with high-level ability to imagine? But it says this low imaginative ability was correlated with lower forgiveness. Well, it's the complete opposite with us. It's the complete opposite with us. We have a high scope of imagining. So by proxy, that would mean what? We have a higher threshold to forgive. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's the logical thing to do in the moment. And we have to learn how to separate ourselves by understanding how we're made so that we can move accordingly per situations that denote a different level of intellect having to come online, as such as this case right here. But I also want to read this to you guys. In another study with more practical implications for society, participants were given criminal scenarios and asked to dole out punishment as they were on a jury. Right? Participants showed more metabolic activity in the pecuneus, right, left temporal parietal junction, and dorsal medial prefrontal cortex when given scenarios that elicited sympathy than for no sympathy scenarios. Signal increase in these regions was also associated with the reduction of punishment. This suggests that jurors and even possibly professionals could be impacted by their own physiologic responses when it comes to giving out punishments rather than basing decisions on purely rational decision making. Now, why is this important? These areas of the brain start to come online, right, that deal with forgiveness when people are in an environment where they're having to judge people for quote-unquote wrongdoings. Now, why is this important, Minister Jew? Because remember, the jury gave the sentence. Now, we have to remember this. It wasn't the judge. It was the jury. Let's read. And these are some clips that I got from like CNN, just because other people were saying the same thing, and I had to go find some information and share it. But it says, Dallas District Attorney John Crusoe said that his office is very pleased with the verdict and sentence. When asked if his office was concerned about a 10-year sentence, Crusoe said, though personally he expected a longer sentence, he respects the who? The jury's decision. A Dallas County jury deliberated for about an hour and a half before deciding upon a sentence that was well short of the maximum 99 years in prison Ms. Guyger could have received, but also longer than the 2 years jurors might have imposed. So we see here that we're reading correctly that the jury is the one who decided the sentencing. Now, wait a minute. These were the same people who actually convicted her of murder. Okay? But what happened? What happened in between 24 to 48 hours after the conviction? Here comes the sentencing portion where people are now coming in, and now there's an emotional plea being made, right? I was talking to my grandmother about this, and I said, Grandma, it's neuroscience. I said, we have to understand how we're made, and then we can kind of protect ourselves when these situations happen. And I was explaining to her how, we have these things called mirror neurons, as you can see on my screen now, but I want to just continue telling the story. And I said, Grandma, these empathy neurons, these mirror neurons come online when somebody is in our close proximity, or we're talking to them about a situation. If they're depressed or they're worried, whatever the situation may be, we start to identify with these people because we are naturally social beings. And then these mirror neurons start to cut on in our mind that are replicating the neurons that are firing in the person's brain who we may be consoling or giving sympathy to. And then our brains start to reflect as if it's us who's going through the situation. These are neurological facts, ladies and gentlemen. This is not some type of metaphysical mumbo jumbo where you just could blurt out anything and it can never be proved. These are neurological facts. This is real spirituality, people, because then you can understand how you're made, and then you can create techniques based upon these principles of how consciousness funnels itself through your brain to get a different response in the objective world. It's called quantum imaging. It's what I do. It's called quantum scriptures. It's what I do. It's called Jew talks. It's what I do. Right? So my grandmother said, you know what, you're right. I've been in situations where a person was dead wrong, and they start crying, and then the next thing I knew, I started to feel bad for them. I said, see? I said, we see it in our everyday lives all the time, but nobody's discussing or describing to us why it's happening. So a lack of information is causing people to become victims. So let's read this. Mirror neurons or empathy neurons automatically mirror the other person's emotions. Before you know it, you are reflecting the emotions of others in the mirror of your mind. Right? V. Ramachandra, the role of mirror neurons in processing vocal emotions. Evidence from psychophysiological data. International Journal of Neuroscience, 2009. I'm not making this up. This is a real phenomenon. You can go study it yourself. I give out these case studies in the boatloads in our private memberships. I got 200 of these, maybe more. But this is what happens. The juror and the judge and the family, they're sitting in there watching this lady give this tearful and, heartfelt, supposedly heartfelt testimony. I wish it was me. I wish I could trade places. Then the people get up there on her behalf of the sentencing, talking about how she was such a nice person and this and that. And these people, not understanding how they're made, they are syncing up directly with these neurons, and now all of a sudden they're feeling like they're in Amber Guyger's shoes. This is the real deal. So here, this is from Scientific America, of two minds. Now listen to this. The listener's brain patterns mirror those of the speaker. More evidence of what I am trying to convey. A new study from Princeton University reports that a female student of lead investigator Yuri Hassan can project her own brain activity onto another person, forcing the person's neural activity to closely mirror that in her own brain. The process is otherwise known as speech, just from talking. I remember I showed this a few months back in one of my webinars that I did, where you could actually, and I showed the brain scans where the speaker and the listener's brains, their brain patterns and the electrical activity that was going on was identical from the speaker to the people who were listening to the speaker speak in the audience. So now you got all of these people sitting in this courtroom not understanding this invisible force that connects us all. And all of this sympathy and these empathy neurons are firing in the brain, and everybody in there is on par and in sync. And then you trying to figure out why these things happen and why the outcomes are the way that they are. What the Gene family should have did was got up and walked up out of the courtroom while Amber and all of her people that were on there on her behalf of the sentencing were giving, their portion of, why Amber's nice or whatever the case may have been. Okay? So that's how that works. That's how that should have transpired. We have to learn how to take ourselves in and out of environments based upon how we're made in order to get the best results. And we have to learn how to appropriate different imagery in our minds when we're seeking a different outcome. See, here's the other thing, and I don't think I put a slide in here for this, and I don't want to go too far into this right now because it's a lot to talk about. But what we have to do is when these situations pop up, when cops have murdered innocent black people or innocent people in general, and they're on trial or going to trial, we have to stop letting our confirmation bias take us over. What is confirmation bias, Jew? When we have experienced a multitude of things that have already happened, our brain is looking for something that it can identify with that says, I'm familiar. So, and when new things are introduced to that bias, we tend to discard certain facts or evidence that go contrary to what we've already been conditioned to think or believe is a reality based off of our previous experiences. This is dangerous, and I'm going to tell you why. We are spelling our way to doom and frustration every time we do that. So first it's, oh, I got a feeling she gonna get off. Everybody on Twitter, everybody on Facebook, everybody on Instagram, oh, I got a feeling she gonna get off. We're spelling, we're sending that energy into that vortex in that courtroom, not knowing that we're influencing the people in there. And I'm not making this up either. You're going to see this on this next slide, right? And then it goes, now she gets convicted. Then the conversation switches to our confirmation bias goes here. Oh, well, it's just because she was white and she was a woman. She's a white woman, right? That's the only reason that they really convicted her. But these are the same people that are talking about white supremacy running through and through. Now, if it was really all like that, they could have just acquitted her like they do 90% of the other times. But no, it's a guilty verdict, you see? So our confirmation bias comes in and we start spelling again, and we go to the most immediate worst scenario, right? Then after that, it goes to, oh, well, I bet she only going to get 2 years. She only going to serve 4 years. Then our confirmation bias go to what we previously known before. And we just keep regenerating the same thing, and we keep fulfilling our own prophecy based upon us not understanding how we're made. And I know this is going to be difficult for some people to swallow, appeal for some people to swallow, because they're thinking objectively about the other people. Oh, I ain't got no effect on what those people, decisions that those people make. Well, let me show you something. There was an experiment that they did, and multiple experiments like that they did, where they took siblings or people who are closely related, or there's a bond, there's an emotional connection. And we all know how we are when these trials are going on. There's a unified connection all across the country between people of color who are watching it. It's a unification that's happening on Twitter, on Facebook, all through the digital ethers, right? But siblings, now watch this. Siblings pretended to touch their brothers or sisters through visualization, and the EEG reading showed that the one who was imagined being touched, brainwaves responded as if they were physically being touched. They are in two different rooms, not even in the same proximity with one another. They got these brain scanners, fMRIs, these EEG machines hooked up to these people's skull, run these tests over and over again. One person in one room imagines that they're just touching the other person's hand way somewhere else. That person who has an EEG machine on too, their brain picks up a signal as if they're physically being touched on their hand. This is also a neurological fact. See, we're going to have to get past the ignorant spooky talk and get into the cognitive spirituality. How can we see this in real time? This was S.A. Koran and E.W. saying, enhance power within a specific band of theta activity in one person while another receives circumcerebral post-magnetic fields, a mechanism for cognitive influence at a distance. 2003. As you can find, these are the doctors who did this study. S.A. Koran and E.W. Sang, enhanced power within a specific band of theta activity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now, it would behoove you to take on a different set of instructions when these situations are going on. This is a different level of understanding, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to have to get to if we ever going to see some real results. I'm going to wrap this thing up because I didn't want it to go past 30 minutes. I know people's attention span is short. So here's a big one. Everybody's going to the Bible. Oh, these forgiving people or these Christians, yada, 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 yada. Well, first of all, like I started off, the pastors, they don't really understand. And if they do, shame on them. But if you're going to really, really understand what you're reading in these texts, you're going to have to get you an exhaustive concordance, and you're going to have to translate these words to really understand what they mean. So here's Matthew 18:21-22. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? And Jesus said unto him, I say unto thee, until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Right? Now watch this. What does sin mean? Right? We have to really, 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 really understand this. Sin translates to a word, hamartano, right? 264 in the concordance. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. But sinning only means, this is what it means, to miss the mark and to not share in the prize. That's it. To miss the mark and not share in the prize. You got a goal, or you got a destiny, not a destiny, a goal or desire, and you fall short, you sin. You missed the mark. You had a whatever. You had something that you thought you wanted to accomplish, and you didn't get it done. You missed the mark. That's a sin. It's not what we think it is. People think, oh my God, it's something evil. To miss the mark and not share in the prize, meaning not being able to reap the natural benefits of good things, of normal natural things, right? So people read this and they say, oh man, 70 times 7, 490 times. Not at all. When you see numbers in the New Testament, they're making references to Hebrew letters that have specific value. 70 is ayin, which is the inner eye of man or the imagination of man. 7 is Zayin, which means a direct light source from quote-unquote God and nourishment and sustenance. So it's not 490 times forgive your brother, but a continued use of the inner eye to lift that person up to a healthy and a fulfilled state, i.e. to nourish them to wholeness. That's the true nature of forgiving, not watching somebody continually suffer and say, oh, too bad for that person. Oh, that's terrible what they're going through. Oh, and you just keep on adding on to the wave of disaster and debacle. No, you're supposed to use your inner eye of visualization to see that person being sustained, see that person being made whole. That's the true nature of Matthew 18:21-22. But they're saying these things in allegorical story form, and people have a hard time when you do these translations separating it from the allegory and putting it back into first person as you're every character in the text. So you're Peter, you're Jesus, You're the brother, and everybody else around you is playing these roles too. Okay? So again, 28 days of gratitude and visualization, opening the pathways to success. We starting this thing Sunday, October the 6th. Listen, we're going to get it in. We don't get nothing but results from the work that we do. For 5 years, we've been putting on and showing people how to do this, and it just gets greater and greater every year. I'm so thankful and grateful for all the people that have come my way through these teachings. Been a proud, teacher in relationship to that, because so many people, lives have changed, and I'm just grateful that I've been the instrument to help them. So again, you want to get in this 28 days of gratitude and visualization, because we're really going to go in. We're going to be dealing with health, finances, relationships, and love. It's going to be awesome. So again, the link is going to be in the description box. Come on in and join us. Hope to see you there. Hope you enjoyed this presentation. Peace.